New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
Reverend Michael right here.
And this is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. We are so very grateful you're with us here today. We're going to move some things around, get everybody set up properly. We're grateful you're with us. We have the most esteemed guest I think anybody's ever known of in New Thought, in the New Thought movement, Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith from the Agape International Spiritual Center in Culver City, California with us today. We've got a great program in store and all kinds of fun. So let's dig into it. If you don't know Reverend Michael, he is prolific in the New Thought movement. We looked up, we tried to put together an introduction earlier, and we'd be here for about 25 minutes with the number of awards, the things he's done, the places he's served, the way he's shown up in the world. One of the co-founders of the Association for Global New Thought, who you know here through the network as well. And for both Reverend Elzia and I, one of the transformative author of the Life Visioning Process. And you know how much we love visioning around this network as well. So we're going to dig right in. Z is going to get started with our interview here and sharing a little bit. And before we do that, but we want to say welcome, Dr. Michael. We're so grateful you could find some time and be with us. And we got a lot to talk about. So thanks for being here.
It's my joy to be with you both today and all the people who are tuning in. I'm here to serve and I'm here to be me.
Yes. Well, that's all we want. I mean, that's all we can ever be, which is one of the things that you teach. Is this whole idea? One of the things that affected me, let me put it that way, was the whole idea of transformative living, of how we take these New Thought, ancient wisdom concepts and metaphors and stories and see ourselves within them, so that even if there's a little bit of doubt, we're able to find ourselves and transform to something greater. And if you could just share a little bit about that, that would be a great way to start, I think.
Absolutely. Well, you're basically dealing with the foundation of our teachings that, from New Thought, ageless wisdom, perception, we're a spiritual idea held in the heart mind of the infinite. We have everything that the presence has loaded and coded within us. There's nothing missing. This presence doesn't do do-overs. The present doesn't repeat itself. So each and every one of us are distinct, individualized expressions of infinite presence. And we're at the point of our evolution. We're at the apex of one form of evolution and the beginning of another form of evolution, meaning we're through evolving through circumstances and situations, which takes hundreds of years. We're into conscious evolution. Where through practicing these spiritual principles that both of you teach, we're able to participate in our own unfolding through spiritual practices of affirmative prayer, life visioning, meditation, sacred service, study, fellowship. So we're not leaving our growth to happenstance or chance. We're participating in our own unfolding. And this separates us from people trying to be good, waiting to die and go to heaven. We're teaching that, of course, heaven is a state of consciousness that you engage in and activate, and you take it with us. You take it with you everywhere that you go. So when you speak about transformation, I define, the word trans means to go beyond. So we're going beyond the formation of our present life that's being produced by our present paradigm, our present way of thinking. We're going beyond that. by insights and revelations that happen in prayer and meditation. So we're literally going beyond our present formation of our life as a way of life, not waiting for something to happen.
Right.
Realizing that we are the happening and we're consciously embracing that, you see.
Yeah. And I love that because, one of the first things that Ernest Holmes says in the Science of Mind textbooks, he looks forward to the day when spirituality and science walk hand in hand. And that is the first statement that comes out, and we're there now because we know through epigenetics and environmental things on how they affect our DNA, that when we can have conscious thought, as you said, and we can have these transformative ideas and use them as vision points for us to move forward as humans, we have the capacity to go beyond anything we can imagine, because when those two come together, it's explosive and quantum, as they say. And so I think that is just
we're limitless beings. And as you've said, if an individual, like right now, just listening to us speak, if they have an insight, a revelation, if they have just a moment of clarity, in this second, they start producing serotonin, dopamine. They start producing all manner of tonic chemicals that begins to balance their immune system, balance their blood pressure, makes the coherence of the brain come together. That's immediate. And then if you continue along that, then the circumstances and the situations of your life, which are coagulated thought patterns, begin to change as well. So it's not a matter of praying to God, to give you something. It's a matter of you becoming aware that you've already been given it. And then if you activate it, your life will change. So science and spirituality are married again. The quantum reality says that whatever's going on everywhere at the same time. And in mysticism, we know that the center is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere. So different language saying the exact same thing. And you mentioned epigenetics. People used to think that your DNA controlled your destiny. Now we know, as we've been teaching in New Thought for hundreds of years, that the moment you change your perception, your DNA changes.
Yes.
You don't have to follow the pattern of your parents and grandparents. You change your thinking, you change your habits, your body temple changes, your life changes. We're not victims of circumstance.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
So you're absolutely right on that. Yeah.
And as one of the newer guys to the party, as it would be, back in 2001, when I first stepped into a religious science center, one of the first things I was taught was the visioning process, and taught at that same time that in prayer, we're kind of speaking at God, and in meditation, we're kind of listening to God. But in visioning, we have a conversation with the divine, and we can allow for those revelations to uncover the truth of who we are, rather than us just saying, "Oh, this is what I want to be."
Absolutely, you're right on target. When that originated, I originated the life visioning process when I actually began Agape. It's how I built Agape, through the life visioning process. And I was teaching people that instead of just having a business plan, instead of articulating what we wanted, we had to become aware that within the divine idea itself is a perfect pattern. Just like within an acorn, the oak tree already exists. And so if an acorn were to do the visioning process, it would see an oak tree. And so in the same way that there's something loaded and coded within us, and if we ask empowering questions, then we can allow that which is within us to emerge. And that which is within us that's seeking to emerge is oftentimes bigger than what our surface mind wants, right? Bigger than oftentimes what we can even imagine. So in the vision process, what we're doing is surrendering to the next stage of our own unfolding, the same way that a seed is surrendering to its next stage of its own unfolding, growing roots and shoots and becoming its greatest yet to be. And I can remember back in those days where some of the elders of our community were kind of mad at me because they were telling me, "We don't want you to introduce the word surrender back into New Thought. We've gotten rid of that word. It's old theology. Don't do this." And I was saying, no, you don't understand. I'm not saying surrendering to an external God, a man God in the sky. I'm saying surrendering to the deep, infinite potential of your own being. surrendering to the next stage of your of what's trying to come forward within you. It's not surrendering to God out there. It's surrendering to a part of you that you don't even know about yet. It's beyond your imagination, because you may have been loaded and coded by your ancestors, by your parents, by society, by false religions, by education systems, by the society. But there's something within you that's not been touched by that. We're surrendering to that. Yes. And so the vision process allows us to embrace dimensions of our own being that don't come from the world of effects. It comes from the depth of our own soul. It's a very powerful process, transformational, as you know.
Yeah, and I love that, because, you know, when I first found Agape, I was reading, you know, trying to figure out what it was, and it said that we are trans-denominational, which I think is right on point with the visioning process, because it allows you to get beyond any box that you're in. And once you can get beyond the box, you literally can begin to see that, well, the boxes are shaped different, maybe different material, but the content of the box is the same.
Yeah.
And so when we can tap into that and do the trans-denominational and look at that's where the ancient wisdom part came in for me, because I came to New Thought from an Islamic background. And so I was like, well, this is the same thing. This is more like a Sufi order than anything else. It's just,
that's it.
It's like, hey, let me jump right in.
That is it. You see, again, you're going trans-denomination, we're going beyond denomination, because the presence of God is too big to fit into one denomination, you see. And they used to call us the Sufi end of New Thought, because of the celebration, the dance, the love, the ecstasy, the bliss. Yes. You know, we're celebrating the divine presence, going way beyond denominations, because you take all the religions in the world and all the denominations in the world, the presence of God is still bigger than all of that. Yeah. You see? And so, as you're saying, we don't want to get caught in a box. You know, I used to say years ago that if you were to be in a room and you were to look at life through all these different windows, you know, here's a sweet, peaceful Islamic window. Here's a wonderful, compassionate Christian window. Here's a wonderful, mindful Buddhist window. You go through all the windows, all beautiful. But ultimately, you want to step outside the house totally and have a direct contact with reality, not looking through any particular window. Yes. We're just having a direct contact with reality, but praising and giving thanks for the window that brought you there. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like every religion is a pathway to the transcendent. But once you get to the transcendent, you can celebrate your pathway, but you don't keep defining yourself by the pathway. Yeah. You know, it's just like if everybody's taking a boat, a boat through the Nile, and you're going up to the Great Pyramid, you know, you appreciate the boat. But once you get to the Great Pyramid, you're not hanging on to the boat. You're going into the king's chamber. You know, you say, yeah, that was a good boat, but you don't identify yourself with the boat. You say, hey, I'm here. I'm meditating with my ancestors, you know. So oftentimes people get caught up in their boat, and then they forget the transcendent. And New Thought brings us back to the transcendent. It's a powerful, powerful teaching. Yeah.
And as you said that, as you were saying that, a thought came into my mind of an old gospel song of how I made it over. You know, I didn't stay there. Something took me over here, and now that I'm here, I'm not going back. I'm gonna set roots right here, which is what we're trying to teach in this teaching.
Absolutely, and I think that we're setting an example for the world, because oftentimes people in the world are still clinging. They're still clinging to how they got over. They're still clinging to it, and if they get fundamental with it, they'll even say things like, this is the only way to get over. Yes. And then that creates division from other people. Right. You know, this is the only way. If you don't do it this way, then you're out of integrity with the universe. And when people do that, they unconsciously create divisiveness from the rest of the population, of which your religion, whatever it is, because religion means to bind oneself back to the source. Your religion is supposed to bring unity to everybody, not create divisiveness from anybody. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Folks, if you're wondering what you've stumbled into, this is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. Reverend Elzia and I have the pleasure to be here with Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith today. And I want to bring forward something that I was introduced to not long ago. I don't know how long ago she wrote this, but Lisa Rankin wrote a piece, a rather long blog post. And in that, she describes specifically your ministry, Reverend Michael, as the birth of prophetic new thought. And she defines that as a metaphysical approach to social transformation, which comprises a practical application of spiritual principles to directly address the violence, injustice, and suffering that exists in the world. And I'd love to know, does that feel that it's an accurate representation of what you and Agape have become in the last 35, 36 years or so that you've been?
I would say that it definitely encompasses a lot of it. When we go through the history of Agape and even the birth of the Association for Global New Thought, we were pioneers in basically using principles to grow, but actually to affect change in the world. And again, back in the old days, not so much now, but back in those days, people were a little critical of us moving into some of the social conditions that were going on in the world. People were using the incorrect understanding of New Thought, saying you don't need to jump into that. Just stay in higher consciousness and the world will unfold. You don't have to really engage with the homeless issue. You don't have to really engage with police violence. You don't have to really engage with these things in the world. And we took a different approach, largely because I came from an activist family, growing up. My mother, was very involved with Malcolm X and Dr. King, Black Panther Party. And I was involved with the Black Workers Congress. And so I came from an activist background, picketing and things like that on a weekend as a teenager. So Agape became a place where I could merge the higher order of being, but with thought and action into how we can participate in the world to alleviate suffering, to develop vision and possibility around gender equality, around equal pay for all people, around for the calling out and the dissolution of police violence and things of that particular, even war, and things of that particular nature. So we were involved in that way. And so it's pretty much that way. I mean, we had homeless and feeding programs way back in the beginning before it was popular for a New Thought community.
Right.
Many of our traditional churches had that, but the New Thought community hadn't really been engaged in that type of activity. And so when we speak about the prophetic aspect of New Thought, we're speaking about beginning to come to an understanding of where we're living right now. What in this moment of human history, what's happening? And how is New Thought defining it? And we can begin to see that there's an old paradigm that's dying, and there's a new paradigm that's being born. And in the quantum reality, it's called the condensate. In Newtonian physics says that two things cannot occupy the same space at the same time. But in quantum physics, it's under the condensate vibration, two things can occupy the same space at the same time, but they're vibrating differently. Right. So at the same time, same space, you have the old paradigm, you have this racial superiority, white superiority, you have the hate mongers, you have all of, and the rising of that kind of hate, which is the last vestige of that being uncovered. While at the same time, you have mindfulness, spiritual practices, meditation, compassion, generosity, forgiveness. You have all of these things coming into more and more manifestation around the globe at the same time. But they're vibrating at different frequencies. Mm-hmm. The lower frequency is louder because the reporters are reporting from the lowest common denominator of the human experience. This program and programs like this are reporting from the next stage of unfoldment. We are the reporters of what's emerging, whereas when you turn on the news, they're reporting on what's dying. They just happen to be a little louder right now, you see. So prophetically, we can speak about what's emerging. And what is our role? To actually hold the frequency of what's emerging, even when the physical evidence of negativity is very loud. We do not buy into that evidence as reality. We buy into it as something that's passing. Just as, you go back 30 years, 30, 40 years, what we're teaching now was seemed exotic. It was It was like, it was woo stuff. You know what I mean? Oh, those are those weird people. They meditate, and they have affirmative prayer, and they don't know Jesus. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But now you fast forward 30, 40 years, what was on the periphery 30, 40 years ago is now central. Every little kid knows about the law of attraction. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that your thoughts actually produce experience. This is all part of, the social milieu of our society. Mm-hmm. So you can actually see the evolution of consciousness that was spoken into existence by Ernest Holmes and the Fillmores and the Dressers and all of these people, you see. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can trace it way back to Kemet, Egypt. You know what I mean? Yeah. All of this teaching is not new thought. It's actually new to America, Yeah. But so you can actually see. So when we talk about prophecy, this has been prophesied for years. I mean, Ernest Holmes' statement, wouldn't it be wonderful if an individual arrived on earth that was for something against of nothing? That's us. Yes. we speak to what's possible without creating hate to what's dying. Yeah. So I know I spoke more than what you asked me, but definitely we encompass that particular dynamic that Lisa put forward and more. Yeah.
And as you were saying that, two things popped into my mind. One is we speak a lot here about spiral dynamics, and that life is a spiral opening up more and more to bring down the glory of God. And if it's 360 degrees, if you use that metaphor, every time as we spiral, when we get back to point zero, we have that confluence, as you said. Point zero at spiral level 1 is a different frequency at level at round the corner number 2. And as we continue to go up that spiral, the vibration is similar, or you can even look at it maybe as octaves, right? Yeah. There's a C note, but there's a different octave, and each one comes with another set of opening. And as you go up, and if you go down, it gets more dense. And I think we are moving and encouraging people to move away from the denseness and move to the light, kind of tongue in cheek.
Absolutely. No, but it's not. It's metaphorical and it's literal. It's literal because when we go through spiral like this, see, like people used to think that when you grew spiritually, it was linear. You go up here, but it is spiral, and this spiral means that every time you go around, there's an expansion of consciousness. The spiral gets bigger, and you keep seeing more and more reality. And as you say, we're not here, as I teach, we're not here to be ascended masters. We're here to be descended masters. Mm-hmm. So that as we spiral up and we get to those higher frequencies, we actually bring these higher frequencies to earth. Yes. As Jesus said, we're heaven on earth, not going to heaven. We're actually spiraling and then bringing the expanded awareness while we have an incarnation. In the old religion, you would be good, you follow whatever the rules were, and then you would go to heaven. But in New Thought Ageless wisdom, while we have a body, we expand our awareness, lift our frequency, and we bring heaven to here. And there's an ever expanding awareness. And what happens is when you expand, then the lower density that cannot be in your consciousness anymore, it comes up to be cleared up. Mm. And it's oftentimes people don't realize that sometimes, I used to still say it sometimes, a bad day for your ego is a good day for the soul. That oftentimes when you're having a very bad day, you're just clearing up and chemicalizing something that no longer works with you anymore because you've gone to another frequency, so it clears up. You're like breaking a fever. You're like releasing toxins so that you can stabilize at a higher level. And oftentimes the ego is afraid of going to that space because the ego doesn't know the difference between awakened consciousness and annihilation, because you're actually going to a space within you that you don't even know what it looks like, so the ego is afraid of it, But yeah, I think the spiral dynamics definitely explains it. And I used to say that all the time, we're actually spiraling up, Yeah. It's a transformational dialogue. It's a transformational practice.
Yeah. I'm hearing a song in the back of my head, One Day in Heaven. but we'll get to that in a little bit, folks. We're going to take a quick break. Let Reverend Michael take a sip of water, and ourselves as well. Stay with us. We're going to be right back with more of New Thought Today after this. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we're back with more of New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. We're speaking today with Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith of the Agape International Spiritual Center. And Reverend Michael, before we took the break there, we're talking about spiral dynamics, and we're talking a lot about how we can truly live this philosophy in the world, not just sit on our cushion, not just be hiding in the closet of believing it's going to get better, but actually doing the work and being in the world. The question I know that I have, and I believe a lot of people out there would like to hear, is how can New Thought compassionately respond to events such as what happened in Buffalo last week? We've got a terrible example of gun violence run rampant, the easy access of guns, and race-based hatred. That if I don't know anybody on our side of the fences or anybody believing New Thought that doesn't want to see a healing and a change to those behaviors in the world. How do you address those with people that come to you asking these questions?
We have to deal with it on obviously on more than one level. When we look at this kind of hate, we understand that it's a sickness. I call it a pathological perceptivity, that the people that are involved in hate, whether it's be a race, whether it's being religion, whether it's being gender, sexual orientation, whatever, they're living in such a narrow perception that they're dangerous to the rest of the world. It's actually a sickness. It's a disease, but it's a disease that allows for it to be dangerous to the population. So that, as I was saying earlier, we're in a particular stage of history now where that which was buried for a period of time is now being uncovered. Years ago, it wasn't popular to be a racist. People held, they may have been a racist in the back room. I'm not talking about back during Jim Crow era, but later it was not popular to be a bigot or to be a racist. You know, people would smile in polite society, but behind the scenes, they would tell jokes about Mexicans or black people or gay people. Now, when you had the Trump era, you know, then it became popular again for people to stand up and say, you know, talk about racial superiority, white nationalism. It became popular again, which from an evolutionary point of view meant that that which was covered up is now being teased into consciousness to be healed. You know, it was Jung that said, until that which is unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our life, and we'll call it fate. So that which was unconscious is now becoming conscious. So from a new thought perspective, on one level, we celebrate that which was hidden is now being seen, because many of our white brothers and sisters, after the George Floyd situation and after the Trump era, were coming up and saying, "You mean this has been going on all this time?" And they were shocked to find out that in many cases, and Black people have been living under this kind of oppression, this kind of racism for years. And when they mentioned it, people were just thinking, "Oh, they're just complaining. This doesn't really happen that much." But police officers are protecting and serving everybody equally. But over the last few years, people are seeing, no, that's not the case. We have been racially profiled. We have been stopped more often than our white counterparts. We have been going to jail way more than our white counterparts for the same offense. It was Chris Rock that recently had a comedy program. He said something very funny that I thought it was very transformational. He says, "I think that our justice system should be like Walmart. If you get a sentence, and if you can find a lighter sentence by somebody else, you get to get that sentence." He said, "Judge, there's a white guy down the street. We got the same. He did the same thing. He's got a lesser crime. I want that sentence." He was laughing our way, as comedians do, into a sacred truth that if a white young man is in front of the judge, he's going to get a different sentence than a Black young man for the same exact crime. So that now a lot of this is coming up for consciousness now, and we can now deal with it. So that's one level. The other level is when we deal with something like white nationalism and racial hate, there should be immediate from every single elected official denouncing white nationalism. We had that last president that said, "Oh, well, there's good people on both sides." No, there is not. I'm not saying that white nationalists don't love their families, but white nationalism does not portend to be a good person. That is a pathological perceptivity. That is a disease. Yeah. And every politician should stand up whenever this kind of thing happens and denounce white nationalism. And there should be a zero policy when that happens. That immediately, this is in the realm of human experience. This is not the realm of metaphysics. This is the realm of just politics. Yeah. It should be not only denounced, but it should be labeled as domestic terrorism, and it should have, with that domestic terrorism, a jail term of whatever term we figure should be, for that kind of thing. And the same way that they did Black people back in the day when they got caught with crack or something like that, they put them to jail for many years, even though white people could be busted with a whole lot of cocaine and get, a few months or a couple of years. Black people went for years. White nationalists that kill somebody, kidnap somebody, shoot somebody, this should be some kind of immediate jail term. Now, I'm not for jailing people. I think that America jails people too much, particularly people of color. We have more people in jail than any other country in the world. However, there should become time to zero policy for this kind of thing. We haven't heard anything from our national politicians. No. President Biden did say something about it for a moment, but no one else except for a few of our Congress people that happen to be people of color, no one on the Republican side, that came up and said, white nationalism should be denounced, should be domestic terrorism. So I think that when I speak, even as a New Thought spiritual teacher, I will speak about the possibility of the beloved community as described by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. manifesting the sense of love and compassion for all brothers and sisters on the planet, to articulate a kind and just global society. And then we need to take action so that our senators and our Congress people hear from us, that we tell them, you have to denounce this as a zero policy, domestic terrorism. You can't sweep this under the rug, so that we're dealing with it on all levels of society. You see, Dr. King described the beloved community, but he also told us to engage somewhere so that our particular, those people who say they represent us are also speaking vision, possibility of where we should go.
And that this really excites me, because I know one of Dr. King's teacher was Howard Thurman, and I know he's a spiritual luminary for you. And back in, I forget the exact time, but I know in San Francisco, him and Fitz started the Church for the Fellowship of All People, which was the first racially integrated church in the country. And they had this idea, because one of his points, Dr. Thurman, was this whole idea of social justice from a metaphysical standpoint of getting active. And I love the quote that he had that says, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do that." Because that is what the people are looking for. That's what makes them come alive. And we need to be able to look at this fellowship of man and figure out, what am I being called? Which the visioning process pops right into. Is like, how do I make this place a better?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What makes you alive? What is your calling? Everybody comes to the planet with a sacred calling. And whatever your task is, whatever your job is, that might be your calling, or it might just support your calling. Mm-hmm. But everyone is called to lift their frequency, to infuse whatever it is that they do with this love, this compassion, this generosity, this beauty, etc. Now, Dr. Thurman absolutely was a mentor of mine. I met him on several occasions. I stayed in Thurman Hall when I went to Morehouse College. And as a freshman, we had a mandatory assembly in which he was the guest speaker. So my first introduction in person to Thurman, he was the speaker. And I remember me and my friends, I'm like 17 years old, getting ready to be 18 as a freshman. And his topic was the benefits of slavery. Mm-hmm. So I'm coming from an activist revolutionary background, and I'm thinking, what? The benefits of slavery? So me and my boys sat up close in the middle of the sanctuary. So we wanted to hear what this guy was talking about, the benefits of slavery. We were like, oh no. So they introduced him. They had this very long introduction of Dr. Howard Thurman, and he began to speak very methodically, he was very engaging. He would just wrap you up. And he began to tell this story of the African on the continent of Africa, and how the African mindset, today we would call it like whole brain, and how the African mindset, this African was connected to the rivers and connected to the trees and connected to the soil. And there was this deep love of nature and a sense of compassion. He didn't over romanticize the African, but he was bringing out these qualities. Mm-hmm. Then he began to talk about the slave trade and how this African mind was spread around created diaspora around the world. And these beings around the world that had this capacity for compassion, this capacity for forgiveness, wow, this capacity for creativity was now spread around the globe. It was in the Americas, it was in Jamaica, it was in the West Indies, it was all over the world based on the slave trade, and that perhaps not building up slavery, that perhaps all of these Africans all around the world had this beautiful brain to actually penetrate the society with compassion and love and creativity. And I was sitting there like, what? It blew my mind. I didn't understand all these concepts until later on in life, what he was talking about. And then he walked down the aisle, just kind of staring. I thought he was like staring, but I realized now that he was in the zone. Yeah. He was in this Christ consciousness space. And I'll always remember that. And then later on in the year, he wanted to meet all of the guys that were recruited from California, New York, and Philly to Morehouse. They had made this big recruitment outside of the South to go to Morehouse. He wanted to meet us to see how, we were adjusting to the South. And I can remember, I've told this story before, so I'm not really telling on myself, but at that time, me and my friends had gone down to get something to eat, and I was high. I was high. And I was saying, oh no, I don't want to meet Dr. Thurman high. And so I'm walking towards Dr. Thurman, and as I got closer and closer to him, my mind became so sober. He was gone. And he started asking me questions about, coming to Morehouse and what had happened. And had been attacked by some racists there. By first month in Morehouse, we were out in the outskirts and some racists chased us, and we had to get in the car and drive away. And, so we were telling him about some of our experiences. But overall, we loved being at Morehouse. But I can remember I was so sober, I was so alive, so awake. And then as he left, the high came back. So I became aware that I didn't know what it was at the time, but I could be aware when I was in his presence. Yeah. I was deeply influenced by his state of consciousness. Yeah. And Dr. Thurman, Dr. King kept one of his talks with him all the time. It was called Jesus and the Disinherited. It's found in the book For the Inward Journey. And Dr. King studied this all the time because when Thurman went to India, he was attacked by some of the Indians there because he was the only Black man in this contingent of Christians who were on this exchange program. And when Indians said to Dr. Thurman, I don't have any respect for you. You're traveling with all of these Christians. And when you go back to America, you're not even allowed to go in their churches. You'll have to either go into the balcony or you'll have to go to a Black church. I can't imagine why you would be a part of a religion that doesn't see you as human. So Dr. Thurman comes home and meditates on this, and he writes this treatise called Jesus and the Disinherited. And he ends up at the end of the writing saying, I'm not merely a Christian, I'm a follower of the teachings of Jesus. So he separated himself from Christianity and said, I followed the teachings of Jesus, and he was ostracized by the Christian religion for many years. And then later on, they're trying to reclaim him back now. But for many years, they were saying he was persona non grata because of that statement. Yeah. You fast forward to O.J. Simpson, when he was found not guilty for those murders, and the Christians were hanging him in effigy in City Hall, and Robert Schuller had a press conference. He said, I'm no longer aligned with these Christians. I'm a follower of the teachings of Jesus. He quoted Dr. Thurman and said, all of this hate that these Christians are fomenting, I'm not with that. I'm with Jesus. So he quoted Thurman and separated himself from the rest of the Christian world. Yeah. So yeah, Thurman has affected all of us, consciously or unconsciously. And I'm so glad that he's a part of my consciousness.
Yeah. And go ahead, Robert.
I was going to say, I think you've dovetailed perfectly into a question that's coming in from the audience. Can you address how New Thought folks can be in exchange with what our friend Linda describes as literal Christian folks who see the literal interpretation of the Bible as the only acceptable way?
Well, what I seek to do and have done over the years is find common ground. I don't do debates because I don't think debates are productive, but I do dialogues. And if somebody wants to dialogue with me, then I will share with them my understanding of these scriptures from a metaphysical point of view, and let them know that if you were to actually follow the Bible literally, then you would actually kill your own children. Like it states in the Old Testament, you could literally kill your children if they offended you in some way. You would kill somebody for particular offenses of which we would find reprehensible today. And so I'll show them that we are evolving as a species. If you want to use the Bible, we'll start with the Bible. In the Old Testament, we're growing from a man God. God suffers anger management. God has chosen people. God is capricious. God gets upset with us. That's a God made in a human image. And then we're growing into the New Testament, where humanity is made in a spiritual image. Thus, man God to divine human. What does that mean? We are described as the light of the world. We are the light that lights up every man, every woman that comes into the world. That's literally, that's metaphorical, that's poetry, but we are literally luminosity. And so we're growing out of a man God to a spiritual being. And you have to engage literal Christians by finding common things. Like I'll talk about Jesus' teaching. It is done unto you as you believe. That's pure New Thought. Your experience is determined by your belief. We deal with you can go with Paul. The Christ, we are the hope of glory that's within all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We can deal with the ground upon which we're standing is holy. The presence of God is everywhere. The kingdom of God is within. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. I'll deal with those particular Bible passages in a way that illuminates our teaching, and then I may sometimes, it's not as much now because we're more validated now. Like 30 years ago, I'd be attacked by some of our Christian brothers and sisters. They called me the Antichrist in Los Angeles for many years. And what was funny? They would be denouncing me publicly, then calling me and asking me to teach them New Thought principles at night, like Nicodemus. You know what I'm saying? They said, we want to gather and you teach us these things, but we don't want to say anything publicly because we don't want to lose our congregation. But if you could just teach us these things. And I did. I would meet with them and teach them, and they would infuse it into their sermons little by little, but they would never say anything like New Thought or anything like that. Yeah. They would just reinterpret the teachings of Jesus in a different way. But we've come a long way, over the last 30, 40 years.
And
I do dialogues.
I can just imagine those same people saying, and you'll have the good taste to not mention I spoke to you, right?
Absolutely.
Come teach us.
I had one guy who was a Presbyterian, and he became so enamored with the teachings that he wanted to break off his church to actually become a New Thought church. I said, no, don't do that. Mm-hmm. I said, keep your Presbyterian church, because it was pretty dynamic church. I said, just begin to bring in the teachings so that you grow your congregation. So he started a Wednesday night service called Agape Night, in which he would teach about unconditional love. He would quote Dr. King. He would start to slowly bring in the teachings, but never say the word New Thought, never say Ernest Holmes. He would never say Beckwith. He would never, and he would start to raise, and he's still going on today. He raised his congregation into these teachings, but he never used the words New Thought or anything like that. And I really appreciated that he did not leave Presbyterianism. He just brought the teachings of Jesus in a very powerful way.
And I'm thinking back to I got to go and find and look at Dr. Thurman's Disheartened with Jesus, but I'm thinking about the whole lecture you said about slavery, and it brings me to the Celebrating Our Soul conference coming in August, and with you a keynote speaker, Dr. Yvette Flinders and Dr. McKeithen. And I'm thinking that same thing about how African-American people or people of the African diaspora are coming into our own, if you will, although we've been here all the time, but this is an opportunity for us to bring that compassion and that ancient wisdom that is steeped in our culture, even here in this country, of how you live a whole life, how you create family and extended family and have a faith that is based on actual contact with the divine. As my father would always say, I'm telling you what I know, not what I heard. I've had an experience of this thing, and I don't need to try to tell you what somebody else told you. I'm going to tell you what I experienced. And I think that's going to be a great conference. I'd love to hear what you thinking about that.
Well, I think I'm glad that we're doing it. It's powerful. I'm glad for the invitation. I'm glad to be a keynote speaker there. And I think two things. One, as African-American people, we have to constantly be reminded that we have a history before slavery. Our history did not begin with chattel slavery. Mm-hmm. In terms of the DNA structure of who we are and being connected to the earth, being the earth's first environmentalist, and having direct contact with the divine through nature, we have to be reminded about that. And that's still loaded and coded within us. And New Thought allows us to actually tap in to our history, our prehistory before slavery. And then secondly, if you go to the history of us in America, there was and I may speak about this there. I'm not sure what I'll speak about, but I'm thinking about I think it's called the Kinsey Report, that was under Lyndon Baines Johnson. Mm-hmm. And they did an extensive investigation and research on African Americans. They didn't call us African Americans back in the 60s, but they did a study on us in America. And they came up with this conclusion that everything that the blacks went through from the time they threw us onto Plymouth Rock, or Plymouth Rock landed on us, as Malcolm X would say, up to present moment in the 60s, with slavery, with Jim Crow, with sharecropping, with public lynching, with segregation, with redlining, with not the ability to buy houses in particular areas, with miseducation, with poor education, all the things that we faced, even up to police brutality, all of this over imprisonment. The research project said that we should not exist in America. But instead of not existing, we have proliferated and risen to the top of every single domain in America: music, entertainment, education, medicine. And they can't understand, and they don't understand. And the research project under Lyndon Baines Johnson was inconclusive as to how this group of people not only survived, but how they rose to the top of business, entrepreneurial, creativity, all the things that we created. They don't understand how we did it. Yeah. So when you go into tapping into that encounter with the divine, even though we had bad religion, slave master religion, we were able to tap into that encounter, even if it was bad religion, and still have the faith of our grandparents. Yeah. The faith of people who prayed for us, faith of our ancestors, and not only made it through, but still rose to the top of many aspects of our community. And it really speaks to the connection with the presence of God. Yeah. It really speaks to that. Yeah. Wow. I think we'll have a good dialogue about that. And the thing about it, I love about us is that we don't have hate for anybody else. We don't have hate for our Vietnamese brothers, our Japanese brothers, our Chinese brothers, our white brothers and sisters, our Mexican brothers and sisters. Our parents and grandparents raised us. It has such compassion. We're all one people. Mm-hmm. We're all one people. So we don't have a lot of, I'm not saying that some people don't have scar tissue that you have to work through. You know what I mean? But as a whole, we don't carry a lot of hate in our DNA.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Folks, we're going to take another real quick break and say thank you to our sponsors, committed givers, and everyone that makes this possible, and give you a little bit more information on the Celebrating Our Soul conference, which is coming up. Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith is a keynote. Reverend Elzia is a presenter and doing a workshop there as well. So don't go anywhere. We've got more coming with Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith here on New Thought Today. We'll be right back in just a moment. Stay with us.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferlin Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a super special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown, RSCP. Thanks for being a super donor. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
And we're back with more of New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. We've got just a few moments left, folks, and we normally wrap everything up with our final thoughts. I want to go first today and leave as much time as we can for Reverend Michael as well. I feel like I came into today having a tough day, having a weird day. And Althea can attest. In the pre-show, I was not in a great mood. And we said, okay, hold on, let's pray, because we know we've got something special coming, and we know that we want to make sure this is really, really valuable. And that's what I want to say. This has been incredibly valuable, being able to sit here and listen and absorb. I encourage you to check out Reverend Michael on his website, michaelbernardbeckwith.com, and learn more about this amazing teacher, this amazing luminary. You can get to Agape International Spiritual Center from there as well. All right, Rev Z, you're up. Final thoughts.
Yeah, well, this has been so inspiring for me, and just reigniting, as Dr. Michael said, we come here as little seed pods, if you will, and we have everything within us to be ignited to buster into whatever it is we're supposed to be. And this was some fertilizer, if you will, for my seed to continue to grow and send deeper roots and send branches up higher. And looking at and that talk by Dr. Thurman on the benefits of slavery, that is, I got to go do some work on that, because what my workshop at the conference is on ancient Egypt's contribution or roots of New Thought. So I'll have to ponder that and put that in there for sure.
That's beautiful. First of all, I'm just grateful and honored to be a part of today. I saw people who were contributing to this. I want to do that. I want our community to make a contribution as well. So please let me know how to do that. And my final words would be, I just want everyone to really catch that each and every one of us are limitless, and that we unconsciously place limits on ourselves via paid advertising, which is called the news, that we watch, miseducation, false theisms and theologies and things of that particular nature. But what New Thought Ageless Wisdom brings us is a way out of that limited points of view. And as each of the three of us know, that once you engage in a new idea, a new thought, and you embrace it, and you practice your conversation, your thought, and your prayer around it, your life will change. And so since we call ourselves New Thought, we might as well have one. And that is through spiritual practice. You will get an original thought from the divine heart mind of the infinite, and your life will change. And that's law.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Reverend Michael, for being with us today. We hope to have you back again sometime in the future. Folks, please do make sure you learn a little bit more and check out the conference. Celebrating Our Soul conference happens at Unity Village in August of this year, 11th through the 14th. You can be up close and personal with both of these gentlemen and a whole lot more. All right, we're going to get out of here for now. Until next time, we wish you, well, our great producer, Diego, who at one time was a part of the Agape community, has something a little special for us to help us get out the door. So we'll boogie our way out.
Transcendence.
Yes.
The CD, they can get that on Spotify.
As we're lifted up,
If they want the original copy, they can go to agapelive.com.
we begin to see a little bit differently.
There we go. All right, folks, we're out of here for now. Thank you, Bob.